All right. Well, it's great to be here, and thank you all for coming back and for being here today. I'm really excited to share what I've learned about the similarities between coaching and facilitation. And I had some people ask me some really great questions this morning about how I'm going to do that, so I'm not going to give all that away. But this will be a highly interactive session for all of you. So my first question to all of you, when you think about coaching, what is it? Right? I've talked to several people who say, I'm a coach. And I think to myself, I wonder if we're talking the same language. So I'm going to do this through a song. So we're first going to hear Lizzo, which is my favorite song of hers, which is Good as Hell. And what I want you to be listening for in the lyrics is what she's describing to you coaching. Okay? There we go. And dancing, by the way, get up. I'm not dancing by myself. Come on. Come on. Oh! Okay, that was weak dancing, you all. Like, come on. Okay, all right, so we're now going to listen to the Queen, Miss Whitney Houston, and her song, How Will I Know? Okay, everybody up. It's time to dance, okay? You cannot listen to Whitney Houston and not dance. Okay, here we go. What is this? Come on. Okay. All right, so think about that. Have a seat. Good job. Nice job. All of you that really put some moves out there, I appreciate that. Okay, you can scan the QR code up there. This is Slido. Which artist's song is more aligned with a coaching framework? It's neck and neck, really. Okay, so for those of you that voted for Whitney Houston, How Will I Know? Tell me why. Why did you select that song as more aligned to a coaching framework? Yes, Alyssa.
I feel like when she says, how will I know, she's putting the onus back on the other person and kind of making them think and reflect about like, what would achievement or success look like?
Love it. So you're looking at it from a perspective of she's the coach, which I hadn't even thought about, so that's a new perspective. Excellent, thank you. Oh, right here? Or I'll let the Katie decide who's going to go next.
Exactly the same reason, and Whitney Houston as coach in this case, because that's a classic coaching question, like I'm going to do how will I know?
Yeah, love it.
It's the follow-up, the accountability.
Great, thank you. Are there some other questions? Why did you pick which song you picked? I saw a few other hands. Who picked Lizzo? Maybe give us what was it about Lizzo's song that you decided was a coaching framework?
I definitely did not pick Lizzo because I agree with them. Lizzo seems prescriptive, like she's forcing her definition of what good is on the person or us. Also, Whitney's just better. And Lizzo's getting sued by a bunch of her dancers, so I don't really trust her as an authority.
I didn't know that, so new information, yes.
Counterpoint, I picked Lizzo because I think if I took it from the person who was being coached, so that's the point of view. And it's like, if I'm feeling good as hell about myself and my day and what I've got ahead of me, I'm like on wings, I'm feeling really good about that.
Nice.
So confidence maybe could have been the one-word answer.
Great, thank you. One more?
So yeah. I chose Lizzo, again, from the perspective of someone being coached, and it's how do I show up?
Nice, okay. Great, interesting perspectives. Take one more, and then we'll talk about, is there a right answer here?
Sure, I also chose Lizzo, Good as Hell, because as a coachee, I am the one that's running the agenda and the discussion points with my coach of how I'm feeling, what I want to do, what I want to see, where my path is going, and my coach is there to help walk me side by side on how I see that path.
Nice, thank you. Thank you all, I appreciate you adding your perspectives. So my perspective was that as a coach, Whitney is asking how will I know, right? And so as a coach, my question back to her would be, how will you know if he really loves you, right? And by the way, there's some emotional suppression in that song, I just want to point out. Don't trust your feelings. No, trust your feelings, right? Lizzo, on the other hand, is being what we would call in coaching a cheerleader, right? And so while that can be effective in what we sometimes think of as traditional coaching, an executive coach would consider that advice giving, right? If he doesn't love you anymore, you walk your fine ass out the door, right? That's advice. And so non-directive coaching is working to not give advice. Even though it feels good, it's a feel-good song. I love that song. It's in my Go Me collection of playlists. And so I just wanted to describe in a way that could bring it to life for you what the differences are and sometimes how we think about what a coach does. So today in our session, and I'm hoping my slides are going to cooperate with me, we're going to talk about how do you apply this then to facilitation. So yesterday, we had some great presenters. I did not get to see the last presenter, so I didn't get to include the information there. But you notice that Eric started us off talking about listening, that we're connecting, we're building bridges, and Skye talked about listening without judgment. She talked about vulnerability is cool. And she talked about metaphors, analogies, and reflection. And Alyssa talked about that change happens through story. That we have to state the problem and that we get to play a little bit with the problem that we're trying to solve. And then Kathy talked about the backpack essentials of curiosity, engaging, embracing detours, and making it real. And then I noticed the session in the afternoon had some things about breaking things down into smaller steps. And all of those are fundamentals of executive coaching. All of them. And so you could see even just through the facilitation that you've already been through, there's a direct connection between the skill sets of a coach and a facilitator. So I appreciate them teeing me up so well. Yesterday, Skye mentioned Triz, and I've used this several times, and before I started working with voltage control, I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I was doing things. And so it was really nice to put a label to some of the things that I was actually already doing. So I looked it up because I was like, what does that actually mean? It's kind of an interesting word. And so you can see there, it's a Russian word, and a loose translation is the theory of inventive problem solving. And so what we're going to do next is we're going to talk about how do you look at counterproductive behaviors and figure out then how can you fix those. And again, we do this a lot in coaching as well. So you're going to have an activity. By the way, anytime you see red on the screen today, there's something for you to do in your table group. So if you're wondering, what are we doing, or you step out for a second, that's going to be your clue to come back. So individually, I want you to take 2 minutes, and I want you to get some sticky notes in front of you. And I want you to brainstorm, consider elements that have been present when you have either seen the worst facilitator that you've ever seen, or you've been the worst facilitator that you've ever experienced, okay? And I want you to write down, and I want you to be creative. I want you to not hold back. What are the things that you see in the worst facilitation? If we could get some music while we're doing this activity. One idea or one element per sticky note, and just pile them up there on your flip chart in the middle of your table. Okay? So by the fact that you're still writing, I think we've all seen some pretty tough sessions, huh? Okay, so you're going to take your flip chart, and I'd love for somebody to just draw a line down the middle on the vertical. And on one side, I just want you to put all of your stickies that you observed where things didn't go so well, okay? On the next step on the screen is I want your team to take a look at and examine and do affinity clustering of what themes do you see. So the ones that are similar or alike, put them on top of each other, put them together in some kind of cluster, okay? Okay, if you haven't already, when you have your clusters together, give them a label of some sort. And then move on to question 2, which is, what makes these hard as a facilitator to overcome? Have a discussion at your table group around that. And then the third step is, you need to decide what's your top challenge, and elect someone to be your Slido entrant person who's going to do that. And I'll share the Slido in just a minute. Okay? So head on back to your work. All right, so there are 13 tables in here. There should be 13 items entered into what is the worst case scenario that your group selected. So just one representative from your table needs to scan the QR code and enter what is the worst case scenario that your group entered. So question for you all, when you look at that list, what comes up for you? And do we have our mics? Okay, right here. Oh, gosh.
I think all of those are tied to lack of self-awareness. So our table chose energy, and from my experience with energy is that we as human beings exchange energy whether or not we know it. And so as good facilitators, one of the first things that you learn, or maybe it's what draws us into this industry, is that we can read energy, and some are better than others. And that's tied to like listening and willingness to learn, be vulnerable. And so I think that all of that negative is tied to not leaning into your authenticity and knowing who you are and how to change for the better and be a better energy space for other people.
Yeah, thank you. That was a good answer. Nice. Appreciate you for sharing that. Yeah. So as facilitators, we're responsible to create the environment in which the learning takes place. The participants actually create the outcome. So if you learn nothing else from me today, if you remember nothing else, your job as a facilitator is to create the environment. You create the container. It's the same thing that coaches do. We create the environment. The participant or the client does the work. Rule number one of coaching is the client does the work. Rule number one of facilitation is the audience does the work. You as a facilitator, that should make you less nervous and take a lot of weight off of your shoulders, because they're responsible for the outcome. You're responsible to structure it and create a framework for them to work within. All right, we're going to do part 2. Flipping back and forth here. By the way, I really appreciate all the work that you're all doing. Give yourself a round of applause. Okay. All right, so we did that. Okay, so now we have to design the fix. So from the one that you selected, I want you to ask this very specific question to your table group. What would it be like if this challenge was resolved? What would it be like in the sessions that you go to if this challenge that you came up with was resolved? And I want you to do the sticky note activity again. Put them on the other side of your flip chart, okay? I'm going to read the rest of the instructions just so I don't have to interrupt you as you're working. After you do step 1, then I want you to, again, what's your best, rank those ideas that you have from best to next best, because they're all going to be great. And then I want you to vote on 2 solutions that you're coming up with that you would submit into Slido. All right. Coming on back. So if you are the representative Slido entrant for your team, you can enter the 2 solutions that your team came up with. There should be, when we get done, 13 line items in here. All right, so as you look through these, and I'll scroll a bit as we're finishing up getting the last 1 or 2 in here, I'd love to hear what stands out to you. And again, this is what would it be like if we were able to design a fix for some of the most difficult things that happen as facilitators. Yes?
So if in Dom's session yesterday, you heard him say one of the most important takeaways from the behavior design system is help people feel successful. And in his book, BJ names that emotion and he calls it shine. So it's the feeling of success that both wires in the habit that you want and propels you to future action. Because if you're feeling successful, you're leaving that session and saying, oh my gosh, what else does Dr. Karyn have for us? And let me tell you about the session I went to last week. So it's the way that you feel shine. And we did have positive outcomes, but we just felt like shine and candor were the differentiators from our group. So that's why we put it up there.
Love it. You know, and I'm just going to make a quick tie to coaching, right? Because when people leave a coaching engagement or even a coaching session, many times that's the energy that's actually creating the transformation, right? And the energy that we create as facilitators is what creates the transformation. So there's direct links, almost, you can make a direct connection to me. Thank you for your comment, I appreciate it. One more, yes, over here.
So I really love how you're relating the coaching work with the facilitation work, and I'd like to hear what you think the differences are, and it's just sort of building on what you just said, because it sparked a thing with me, like you get to the end of the last day of a workshop and everybody's just all jazzed up, they're pumped up on the thing, and then they leave. And then you have that's when the work actually begins, right? And if you're, I assume, in a coaching engagement, you've got a longer term, you know what the next steps, every step is going to be, more or less. You've got a plan, I guess, as a coach. And you should, as facilitators, we should always have a plan after the workshop. But a lot of times you get engaged to do the workshop and create some outputs of the workshop. And that's where a lot of value gets lost. So I'm curious as to what you say.
Yeah, I do think there's a difference there in terms of the kind of once and done of what can be facilitation woes, I guess I'll say, and the impact that you have when you do small incremental meetings over time with people, because there's an accountability loop that's built into that. The plan, I just want to go back to that, the plan comes from the client, right? Again, and that might be a slight difference in facilitation because you generally maybe have some ideas of things that you're going to be speaking about. So there's not a full, the group gets to decide what we're talking about today. So there's some nuances and differences in that, but there's many more connections than there are differences. And yeah, I think that accountability loop for facilitation is actually something that we all need to make sure we're solving for in the work that we do as well. Thank you for the question. Great question. All right. Okay, I'm going to move us forward to a little bit of part 2 here. So this is a great book. I'm a big book/resource person. And Claire Norman has written a book called The Transformational Coach. I also like Marsha, I can't think of her last name, Coach the Person, Not the Problem, Marsha Reynolds. So both of these books are great. This one in particular is really emphasizing non-directive coaching. So what is non-directive coaching? Non-directive coaching is really what the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, espouses, which is that the coach is not a consultant. The coach is not going to be telling you what to do. The coach is going to be creating an environment and setting up these kind of foundations in coaching sessions. So one is really important, that people are whole and capable and competent and resourceful, and that they have within them everything that they need. And that our job as facilitators and as coaches is to help clear the cobwebs and get through the mental hurdles that we sometimes set up for ourselves. We build our own prison walls, I like to say. And so our job is to help people see things from a different perspective, give them an opportunity to sit down and work and do the work in a structured, sometimes unstructured environment. So that's number one. You have to believe that. If you don't believe as a facilitator that your group is whole and capable and competent and resourceful, you really need to check and see, are you actually then just training? Because you're not facilitating. If you're telling them how to do what they need to do, you're either consulting, which there's nothing wrong with that, but you just need to be clear about what it is that you're there to do. The second is that it's an exploratory approach, and it empowers the participant and the client, in this case, to discover their own solutions. The fact of the matter is we can never really walk in someone else's shoes, no matter how similar you are. no matter how much your life experience. I have an identical twin, so I know I blew the bingo card, okay? So I'm the facilitator that has the identical twin. And even though my sister and I literally shared a womb, right, we are very different. And even though we grew up in the same house, right, I cannot necessarily know what it's like to live in her shoes every single day. So even people that are that close. And so when we put our ideas and solutions onto a group or an individual, I like to say we're actually stealing a little bit of their power. There's also a bias that we can work towards with us, which is that people love their own ideas. I mean, how many of you like to be told what to do? Raise your hand. Hi, oh yeah, we all love it, right? And so if we come up with our own ideas, we are much more likely to implement those ideas and take them forward and break them down into small steps and do the work.
Do you discern a difference between the athletic coach in English? Like the word coach in athletics has a kind of connotation. Is there a difference between that kind of coach, as you see it, and the coach in this setting?
Yeah, so the question is there a difference between an athletic coach and a what I'll call an executive coach or a workplace coach? In my opinion, yes, right? Because coaching in sports, right, you're teaching. You're putting together a structure, they're running drills, there's certain plays. I'm not really that into sports, so I don't pretend like I know what I'm talking about. Don't I sound all like, woo? So there's definitely a difference. Whereas in non-directive coaching, I'm going into sessions with asking the client, what is it you want to coach on today? I'm going into facilitation sessions saying, the thing that we're going to be talking about is leadership traits. This conversation can go in a million different directions, and it's going to be up to you to decide which of those directions is most important and most impactful. So while I have a framework when I'm facilitating, I'm going to go where the group goes. And it's part of that being adaptable and letting go of having to control the outcome, which is probably the hardest part in coaching and in facilitation. Right? That we are somehow in control of what's going to happen. I have no idea what you're all going to do with the next activity that we do, and I hope it goes well, but it's up to you, right? So it's letting go is a big part of this. I already talked about the client does the work, and then again, we're responsible to create the environment. Yes?
Good morning, everyone. Just a point on that letting go piece. I think one of the things, and we were talking about this at the table, is if you understand, to your point, coming in and asking, hey, what do you want to get out of today? Sometimes it's important to have data in advance, especially if you're facilitating a session. If you know you all are saying, here are your focuses for 2025, here are where the problems, here are the gaps. What do we want to focus on today related to what you said you wanted to do? Mm-hmm. That's very critical and important, and it can empower you when you get to the end and do a survey. I love yesterday there was a session where the facilitator asked, give me feedback, because we're always improving ourselves as well. So just some points there. This has been great, Doctor. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I love what you said. So the idea that, I'm not just going in and freestyling, right? So I'm doing my homework, I'm doing my prep work. One of the things about data is, I'm just gonna tweak that just a little bit. It depends. So yesterday I was talking to a group about my doctor title. And there's some times where that works for me and sometimes where that doesn't work for me, right? Because it can be intimidating to the group where they think, oh great, this will be an academic, boring, blah, 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 right? Kind of thing. No offense, Eric, but that can be a perception that it comes along with that title. And so knowing that I could go in and I could tell you all the neuroscience of why coaching works. And I could come in with loads of data and research. And some of you would be like, yes, let's talk about that. That's exciting. And others would be like, oh, right? So we started off with Lizzo, right? And Whitney Houston instead, because we're trying to engage in a way and teach in the debrief. That's what I espouse, is teach in the debrief. Have people experience something and then tell them what they just experienced, as opposed to telling them what they're going to, precisely how to do things. Again, just a difference, but thank you for the question. Great question. Ooh. Nope, that was right. Okay, so today we've been following a participative agenda. And we've been doing things like the focus has been on the conversation that we're having within a framework. So I had ideas of what you're going to do, right? I'm using facilitative techniques. We use TRIZ, right? We're doing some engagement activities. The role of the facilitator, again, is to create the environment, but I'm not walking around going, oh, that's that idea. No, don't put that up there. That's not exactly what we're doing. I'm asking you questions, and you're asking me questions, and we're co-creating the experience that you're having. And it's a partnership. We're in a partnership together. I'm not in coaching, it's also a partnership. Just because I went and got a coaching credential and I have all this stuff, I am on equal footing with my clients, which is different. Like when you go to a doctor, like a doctor that can help you, you know, you're gonna probably take their advice, excuse me, or you're gonna seek maybe a second opinion, but you're probably gonna take the medicine they prescribe, or you're probably gonna think about what they wanted you to do, or you're just gonna go do it. That is a hierarchical relationship. The coach and the facilitator, we are on equal footing. I don't know more than you. I don't have your experience. I don't have your background, right? But we are sharing an environment together. So what I'd like you to do is stand up, and I want you to find a partner, someone that you haven't met, and I want you to decide how have we been demonstrating a participative agenda so far today in this session, okay? Find somebody you haven't met. Okay, I'd love just a few shares, maybe from a table in the back that hasn't shared yet today. What were some of the things that you came up with?
So me and Harry were together, and we were talking about that you set the stage from the beginning. You set the environment, because I asked Harry, well, how do you create an environment? I mean, and then we talked about it, and it was apparent you set the stage from the first of the training today that we were going to do the work. You weren't going to do it. You're not going to give us your list, and then we come up with our own list. That's boring as heck. But you're going to leave us alone, and you're going to turn us loose, and we're going to go save the world. So and it was fun.
Good.
So anyway.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. A couple comments over here.
So a meta question came up for me, because we were talking about the dissonance between the two questions, right? Like the what is the outcome versus what are the solutions, and then I saw you come over and it was like figure it out kind of thing, and so we were talking about creating this environment, and does the environment look like a pool or rails, and I wonder if there's matching the situation to the creation of that environment. Like, do you go into a coaching session where it's like, okay, well, declare your outcome, okay, and let's see if we can get there, versus, wow, let's just open up the floor and let it spill out. I don't know.
Yeah. That's a good question. Yeah, it's in coaching, it's a little bit of both. So there is a framework, right? So you're asking the client what do they want to coach on. You're asking them what they want to walk away with at the end of the time together that they don't currently have. And you're asking them, how will we know when we've gotten there? So those are just three very common questions at the beginning of a coaching session. And those are similar questions I ask myself when I'm facilitating. What's the topic, right? What's the intended outcome, right? Where does the customer, right? Because we all have, even though I don't have a boss, we do have a boss, right? All the customers we work with are bosses, right? And how are we going to know when we got there? And then the flexibility is if in a session something has drastically changed, it's, we started off today talking about the differences on what's working and what's not working in facilitation, but I've noticed a shift. And now we're starting to talk more about coaching and how do we apply this practice. And you just throw it out there and you give it back to the group. So I've noticed a shift. We want to still continue on this topic that we originally were slated for, or do we want to shift over and really spend a little bit more time on this? What's most important to all of you today? That's how you handle it. You just adapt and flex in the moment. And you do have a structure and a framework that you're working within, and a way in which you're setting up for people to feel safe that we can do that. We can adjust if we need to. And as a facilitator, that's part of your role. Does that answer your question?
Sure.
Maybe not.
I'm not sure if I had an answer.
Okay, well, good. Yeah, but how much direction you give to when people doing activities, right? That's a choice, because some people are very linear, right? And they want to know they're doing it right, right? As opposed to there really isn't a right way to do things. We're trying to learn and have an experience, so you want to give them that freedom.
So in our conversation, we got a little tripped up on the word agenda, because we're like, well, you know, she kind of mapped out an arc that we're following. So like from that perspective, you know, the road was laid, and we're building the content of the road, perhaps participatorily. So that was one conclusion, which is, well, actually, we wrote on the road, but the road was already there. But then we also saw, well, maybe the question is really, have we demonstrated techniques of how we could build a agenda that's not fully fleshed out? So we sort of saw two different questions, two different potential meanings in the question.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because, you know, in my mind, I have a certain timing, right, that I'm sticking to, and there's certain things I want to get through. But my first slide wasn't, here's the agenda of everything we're going to do and how it's all timed out and mapped out, right? It's not that specific. Again, it depends on what your goal is, what you're trying to accomplish. Back here?
A little bit following up on the outcomes that maybe you were talking about earlier. Jacqueline and I had a conversation around you saying like letting go of the outcomes, right? And kind of a little bit of a debate, like, do you mean letting go of outcomes or letting go of the outcome that you had in mind, right? In my world, I have to drive outcomes through co-creation, participation as a product manager in software. I can't just like facilitate, yay, and then nothing actually happens, right? There are the outcomes out of facilitation, whether that's a roadmap, whether that's a solution that's technical, whether that is a new idea. So I'm kind of curious, like, did we read that right? Can you a little bit, you know, explore more on the outcomes and exactly what you meant?
Yeah. So I would argue that there's different types of facilitation, right? So most of the facilitation that I do is leadership. So if you're in like technology or doing Scrum or those kind of things, and there's certain, and it's not like I get to walk into a company and go, oh, that was fun, right? But there's really nothing that, you know, got accomplished, right? There has to be something, same thing with coaching, right? There has to be a change, there has to be a shift. The letting go of it is the feeling that you are responsible for it. The group is responsible for what actually gets created. That's the outcome that I'm talking about. I can't control what you experience today. I can't control what you walk away with. All I can do is set up the environment and have a structure of things that we're going to be doing. But if it shifts, I also have to be adaptable and flexible to move with that. So I know that in organizations, especially if you work within organizations, and I do too, but you have to somehow prove your ROI of the work that you're doing. They're taking all these people away and you're spending all this time. And I think that that's important. But I guess I would say it's letting go of the fact that you have to walk out with something concrete that everybody is going to go do next. That's not necessarily the outcome that is in every session, but it could be in some, right? It could be in some.
I love that you gave the name non-directive coaching, because that's my coaching background, and it's people who have more directive coaching styles. It's just like, how does that, like, it sort of, so could we give a name to different kinds of facilitation, more directive and more non-directive?
Yeah.
I mean, rather than trying to like figure out which one is right or.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so I think that, like I said, there's different types, right? There's different flavors for what you're trying to accomplish. And similarly, when I'm a coach, I don't always do pure non-directive coaching. There's sometimes when people haven't heard of something or they just don't know, or about a resource or something, and I will offer it to them and say, you know, something's coming up for me that might be interesting to you. Would it be all right if I shared it? So I'm asking permission before I'm giving advice or resources or what have you. Most of the time people say yes because they're polite and they're not going to say no. But I think it's using those things like salt and pepper, right? Not if you over-season things with too much of your ideas, it doesn't go well. And people then start depending on you as a facilitator or a coach to fix everything. As opposed to, again, rule number one is, oh, you forgot rule number one? Yeah, you do the work. The group does the work. Your question?
Just want to say one quick note. Thank you for, one of the lines you said was teach in the debrief, and I thought that was particularly helpful, so thank you for letting us steal that from you. But the other thing that I'd maybe offer to the group is the concept that I think I also use this as a norm when I'm facilitating, but I say the phrase, the smartest person in the room is the room. And I think that helps continue to create a space for like, I didn't create that, by the way, so you can steal that. But the smartest person in the room is the room, and kind of explaining like, like we are collaborating together, we are co-creating together. And so I love what you said, teaching the debrief and using that same methodology. And I think that's what you helped us participate in this morning. And we've been doing it all day yesterday, is this idea that we're co-creating together. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to steal that back in return. Absolutely. And I think, she had a question over here too, if we can get her a mic. Yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
I didn't have a question, more than a comment. But when I was talking to Walter over there, we appreciated the non-directive coaching, and whoever said smartest person in the room is the room. We felt that in our working with our tables. So appreciated you kind of gave that framework, but we were able to work together to determine what direction it was really going to go. And so how I'm thinking about how would I bring that back into my world, also in the delivery space, is making sure that space is such that, yes, we have an outcome we're driving to, but the answer sits with the team that's working on it. So making sure they have that space to kind of do what we did today, kind of set the direction.
Yeah, I love that. The facilitator isn't the expert. They don't have all the answers. I want to make sure we get to this woman in purple here.
Thanks. Yeah, building off of some of the other comments, I think it's useful to think of these things as, different tools, different approaches that exist on a spectrum. And when we understand the different ways that they can be used, we can then align those distinctions to the purpose. Kind of thinking back to one of the early comments about, well, what if I am responsible for the outcome? Or a conversation we were having, well, what if you're the team lead and the facilitator? So understanding, is this a coaching moment? Is it a mentorship moment? Is it a management moment? Is it I'm actually just communicating, telling the story, about the thing that's already been decided, and so that we can be intentional about how we're approaching whatever that interaction that we're having. So again, with facilitation, is this a purpose and a moment where full participatory agenda makes sense and works for everyone, or being able to use that dial as a spectrum, like how much do I need to direct, how much to leave it open, but just having the full range of those possibilities available to us.
Yeah, isn't it nice to have options, right? Yeah, thank you for adding that. Oh, up here.
I have a question. So I'm watching, I'm participating, but I'm watching the pattern of why we did this session. And that's what happens when you present to facilitators, right? We're going to be watching the technique as much as we are a part of it. I've heard some comments that, there's different levels of experience in the room as facilitators. So some people might say, well, I already know what a facilitator role is. I already know that the audience or the group, the room, is doing the work. Is that something, just because we're all human beings and we're not perfect, is that something like gravity that we have to watch out for? Because facilitators are going to get a lot of attention, that we're naturally going to keep leaning in towards we have the knowledge because we're experienced or blah, blah, blah. How do you answer the people that have been like, hey, I've been a facilitator for a long time. I'm fascinated by that perspective. Is this something we have to watch out for?
Yeah, I think our own ego, for lack of a better word, is definitely something we always need to watch out for. And our propensity, if you've always been the expert, or if you know a lot about the group or the room that you're in, it's challenging to not consult. What I would say is if you learn the skills of non-directive coaching, you can turn that on when it makes sense, and you can turn it off when it doesn't make sense. But I think the experience of the facilitator, and experience of the coach, for that matter, I think you always have to put yourself in the learner's mindset to say, I don't have it all figured out. I don't stand up here telling you I know every single thing about coaching and facilitation. This is just the experience I want to share with you. So I think that's my answer to that, is always be watching for that and always keep the learner's mindset.
If I could say something about that, the mic runner. For us, we explicitly tell our participants, you guys are the subject matter experts. We work for a healthcare company. None of us are in healthcare. You guys are the subject matter experts on laundry spend. We are the subject matter experts in facilitation. And we tell them, you guys are the superheroes. We are the guys in the chair. And we run through action items with them at the end of the meeting. But once that happens, goodbye. You know, they've asked us for 30-day follow-up meetings for them, but, you know, at least for our facilitation, once we end the session, it's up to them. I hope that's helpful.
Very helpful. Oh, one more, and then two more, and then I'm going to move us forward.
Thank you for this experience. I'm going to verbally drift towards a question. There's one here. I'll get to it, I promise. You talked a lot about coaching and facilitation, coaching and facilitation. And I think there's also some nuance between facilitation and consulting, as we've started to allude to. I think oftentimes in my experience, people, my clients, hire a facilitator, but they expect a consultant, if that makes sense. So even though we bring that process neutrality, there's always questions that are veering into that subject matter expertise. I personally am comfortable having that neutrality. However, one of the things we talked about at our table was that as facilitators, we often arrive in a spirit of service to other people in the room. And I think this is a room where you say empathy and compassion and humans, we're humans, and we nod because we respond to people in that sort of way. So like double clicking way into the room, not the client conversation, but you're in the room and you have those participants who want you to be the expert. They want you to tell them how to do something, even though you believe they've got it in them. I'm just curious what tips or tools you would offer in terms of how do you help empower people in the room to believe it in themselves if they don't have that already?
Yeah, I love that question. I love the drifting to the question too. I'm going to steal that as well. So it's, and my mind just immediately clicked into coaching because I have coaching clients too that will tell me what to do. I don't want to think about it, just tell me what to do, right? And so the way that I approach that is I say, well, I can. There are ideas that I've come up with, right? We are all smart people. We all have had different experiences and been exposed to things. And I'll just say, I have a few things that have come up for me. If you're interested, I'd be happy to share those with you. And then I'll serve them up on a platter, like 3 things. One thing that's come up for me is this. The next thing that's come up for me is that. And this final idea. You don't have to do anything with any of them. But that's the way I handle it, is I just put them out there as, yeah, I have ideas and things like that. That doesn't mean they'll work here, because what happens is, what the trap is you, especially if I don't work in the company, I put my thoughts out there, well, that won't work here because you don't know anything about manufacturing corn syrup, right? Well, no, I don't. And so if you serve it up in such a way that people can say, okay, she's giving us her ideas, I may have to tweak it, or I may not like it at all, that's the way I approach that situation. I have one, okay, go ahead.
I would add to that too, in the facilitation setting, I always like, when someone asks me a question as if I'm the expert, I always say, I might want to take a pass at that in a moment, but first I would like to put it out there to the group, and let's hear from the wisdom and the brilliance and the expertise from the group first.
Yeah, I love that too. Yeah, throwing it out to the group, the collective, absolutely.
This is more of an answer than a question, but it's a useful metaphor that one of my coaches used in certification, which was, I'm going to take my coaching hat off and put my consulting hat on right now and tell you what I might know about this. And then I'm going to take my consulting hat off and put my coaching hat back on. It just helps to keep it clear.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it could be true, the directive coach too, you know, like I'm going to be a directive coach here, I'm going to be a non-directive.
Right, I like that too. I forgot what I was going to say, I'll come back. All right, maybe one more and then we're going to wrap us up here.
I was going to say, I loved how you offered out your ideas. I borrow something from a coach I have, and sometimes when I'm talking to her, I'm like, I'm really kind of stuck, not sure where to go with this. It's, let's go on a shopping trip. So I'm going to show you what the store has. You have to tell me what direction you want to go. What's going to work for you, your org, your situation. But oftentimes we find ourselves on a shopping trip.
Yeah, yeah. Another couple quick, questions I can tell you back for facilitating. And when somebody asks me for my opinion, I'll say things like, well, what's most meaningful or important to you? Right? What would it be like if you were able to solve that? So I think trying to throw it back as much as you can to the room, versus what you alluded to, and I didn't get your name, but is now I'm the expert. Right? And you want to just watch how many times you put yourself in that position if you're truly trying to embody the structure that we've talked about today. Well, my timer is timing down on me here. So a couple superpowers, okay? Superpowers that I know you all have and that coaching really espouses, which is, first one is listening. We listen on 3 levels as a coach. We listen for the facts, we listen for the emotions, and we listen for what's not being said. So when Whitney Houston was crooning to us this morning, How Will I Know? What were the emotions that are part of that song, if you had to just shout a couple out? Angst, vulnerability, despair, uncertainty, right? So there's emotions behind the words that people share. There's also connecting the dots. If someone is sharing something with you and it's becoming a theme, you can say, there's a couple of dots I'm trying to connect here. Let me just ask you if this resonates and correct me with whatever doesn't. So a lot of it's in how you position when you are going to make a statement as a coach, and then always follow up with, or a facilitator, did I understand that correctly? Or what's your reaction to that as I share that with you? So just these are just techniques and things that we use when we're trying to understand and listen. The other thing is to create space and silence. Silence is underused in our world today. And I'm always amazed when I just pause and let people think that more and more comes out. And you noticed it today, people ping pong off each other and ideas get grown from that. My advice to any leader, including myself, is talk less and talk last. If I ever write a book, that's probably going to be the title, so nobody gets to steal it. Okay. So the more you talk, the less you create less space for other people to be with their own ideas. So short statements, short questions, brief. And then mirror neurons. Who's heard of a mirror neuron? What's a mirror neuron?
It's when, well, oh gosh, no.
Oh, on the spot. You can help.
Isn't it when like it fires in both people at the same time, or is that totally off?
That's close. Okay. Mirror neurons?
Stick to Mike Rennick.
It's okay.
I think it's when the same neurons fire in your brain when you see someone else doing it as if you were doing it yourself. Is that correct?
That's close as well. Yep, you are very scientific. All right. So it's the idea that when so I want you to, whoever you're sitting across from, mirror their body language real quick. Like pick somebody and just do the exact same thing. Okay, what that does is it instantly creates comfort. It instantly creates comfort. So when you sit down next to someone, if you want to create a comfortable environment, mirror them. If you're talking to someone, their language. If somebody says to me, gosh, I'm really frustrated with this situation, I don't say, oh, it sounds like you're super annoyed with that. I say, tell me more about what you're frustrated about. I use the exact language because it's comfortable. It's their language. Annoyance and frustration could mean 2 different things to someone. Okay? So mirror language. Use people's words when they share with you. And our second superpower is inquiry. So the process of asking questions. Questions that evoke insight. Short, brief questions. They usually start with what or how. And then I'll give you the magical question, too, which is, if you woke up tomorrow and this situation was all resolved, what would be different? How would that have happened? What steps would you have taken? Because it forces us into future thinking versus our challenges right here, right now, which we can get kind of mired down in. And then always, right, we talked about this extensively, is avoid leading questions, which it sounds like, wouldn't it be great if you just tried to do this? That's a leading question, right? Versus, what might you try? So starting questions with what or how, there's all kinds of books out there on questions that you can use, but those are 2 superpowers. So I'm gonna end with, we're not unfortunately gonna run out of time for this part, but I wanna ask you, what were your key insights from today? And, in coaching, we always ask, what did you learn about yourself? What are you taking away with you? And what type of support might you need? So as you end your sessions in facilitation, I invite you to try on some of these questions. What small experiments might you make? And the last question that I always ask is, what else do you need from our time together today to feel complete? What else do you need from our time together today to feel complete? So, in my last question to all of you is, this is a reflective question. What will you use from our session today immediately? So take a few minutes and jot that down, and I thank you so much for your time and attention today.